Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an idea that might just change how you see yourself, reality, and, well, the very nature of the divine.
So let's start with a really radical question, one that pushes back against how most of us were taught to think. We usually picture God as something distant, separate, right? A being we pray to. But what if that's not the whole story?
What if the divine is actually the awareness you're using to experience this very moment? This is the core insight of a mystic whose ideas were so revolutionary, so wild for his time, they were actually condemned as heresy. So, let's meet the man behind them.
Okay, we're jumping back in time, way back to the 13th century. We're going to meet the German Dominican friar who made this incredible claim, Meister Eckhart. And his teaching was so direct, so powerful, it was about to shake the very foundations of the church. So, who was this man? Who was this person who dared to speak of God not as some far-off king on a throne, but as the very ground of our being? And maybe more importantly, what made his message so dangerous?
The thing about Eckhart is that he wasn't some fringe outsider. No, he was a very respected theologian who studied in Paris. But he chose a much more dangerous path. See, instead of debating complex ideas with other scholars, he went out and preached to regular, ordinary people in their own language, which was a huge deal back then. His message was that a direct, personal experience of God was available to everyone. And that's what got him into hot water with the church and ultimately led to his condemnation.
Okay, so let's get to the heart of it all, his central teaching. It's something that is both beautiful and incredibly profound. It's this idea of a divine spark that exists inside every single one of us.
And you have to understand, for Eckhart, this was not just a pretty metaphor. He saw it as a fundamental truth, almost like a law of spiritual physics. He said there's a place deep within your soul, at its very core, that is completely untouched by the world. It's uncreated, it's pure, and it's identical to the divine.
Now, when Eckhart uses the word intellect here, it's easy to get tripped up. He isn't talking about your everyday thinking mind, the one that's constantly worrying or making lists. No. He's pointing to something much deeper, a higher intelligence, a pure awareness that exists beyond your personal thoughts and ego. And get this, it's a part of you that is fundamentally uncreated. It doesn't belong to you. It is you at your deepest level.
So this all sounds great, but how do we actually access this spark? Well, Eckhart offered a practical path. It's basically a three-step process of letting go. First, you have to silence the mind. Then, release the ego, that whole story of me. And finally, you embrace what he called Gelassenheit. It's a German word that means something like releasement, or a kind of deep, serene surrender. The whole idea is about becoming empty so that you can be filled.
What's so fascinating here is that Eckhart's ideas, even though they were expressed within a Christian framework, are not isolated at all. In fact, they echo these core fundamental insights that you find in non-dual traditions from all over the globe.
I mean, just look at these parallels. It's incredible. They really show how different paths using different words can point to the very same truth. So, you take the Hindu school of Advaita Vedanta. The core teaching is Atman is Brahman. The individual self is the universal consciousness. Eckhart's version, the soul's ground is God's ground. Same thing. Then look at Mahayana Buddhism with the concept of shunyata, the emptiness of a separate self. Eckhart's parallel, the soul must lose all knowledge of itself. It is just a stunning convergence of mystical insight across completely different cultures.
All right, now we arrive at what is probably Eckhart's most challenging teaching, but it's also his most liberating. This is where he really pushes the boundaries.
So, you might want to brace yourself for this one, because this is the statement that got him into so much trouble, the one that led directly to his condemnation. And at first, it sounds completely counterintuitive.
On the surface, it sounds like pure blasphemy, right? Why on earth would you pray to God to get rid of God? It doesn't seem to make any sense. But Eckhart is making an absolutely crucial distinction here. And honestly, it's the key to his entire philosophy.
See, to get what he's saying, you have to realize he was talking about two different gods. First, there's the God of our concepts,
That's the limited idea of God we hold in our minds, the one we give a name and attributes to. But then there's the God beyond concepts, the living, infinite, unknowable reality itself. So Eckhart's prayer was about letting go of the small, limited idea in order to make space for the boundless, living truth.
Okay, so what does all of this actually mean for you, right now, in this moment? This is where Eckhart's philosophy stops being abstract and becomes deeply personal and intensely practical.
According to Eckhart, the very awareness you are using to hear my voice and perceive this is not just some private thing happening in your head. It is the divine spark in action. It is your direct and constant connection to the divine. And the best part, it's always on, always available.
Let's just try something for a moment. Just listen. Can you sense it? That silence that's underneath the sound of my voice? The stillness that's behind your own thoughts? That quiet field of simple presence? Eckhart would say that is where God lives. Not in a temple, not in a book, but right here in the infinite living presence of awareness.
You see how this just completely flips the whole spiritual quest on its head? The goal is no longer to be a seeker searching for a distant God. Instead, you realize that you are the very space where the divine comes to know itself. The birth of God isn't some historical event from 2,000 years ago. According to Eckhart, it's happening right now, inside your own awareness.
And so we end here, not really with an answer, but with an invitation. Eckhart's challenge to us, reaching across the centuries, is crystal clear. The question isn't about finding God somewhere out there. It's about becoming still enough to recognize the divine that is already here as the very light of your own perception.